Hello, everybody. My name is Rick McCutcheon. I'm a Dynamics MVP, and I'm here today on this European shipping forum brought to you by NMB Solutions and MS Dynamics World. This session, we're going to talk about future-proof parcel delivery. Maximize your use of the major parcel carrier networks across Europe. And we've got a couple of great panelists today. Nathaniel, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Hi, Rick. Thank you, first of all, for hosting the panel. My name is Nathaniël Nguyen. I am the European Sales Director for NMB, and we are a company that builds supply chain solutions for D365 Finance and Supply Chain.
Okay, great. Sean, over to you.
Hi, Rick. So I'm Sherwin-Smith. I'm the Product Director for Post-Purchase here at nShift. And yeah, I'm really pleased to be on the panel today.
Okay, thank you. So Nathaniel, we're going to start with you. Over the last couple of years, organizations went through some tough times with disruption to global supply chains. Can you give us some background on the current state of global parcel shipping in the supply chain?
Yes, of course. Supply chains have been dominating the headlines for a couple of years now, highly influenced by global events such as the pandemic. Obviously, the war in the Ukraine has had a major impact as well. But if you look at the graph at the top left, you see that parcel volumes have been on the rise even before these global events took place. Right? If you look at 2014, all the way up to 2021, you see a steady increase of about 20% year-on-year growth in the global parcel industry. And the volumes are likely to exceed 300 billion in the next 5 years. And obviously that has its effect on supply chain models, logistics service providers, and distribution models that we take. Now, from a personal perspective, I believe it's simply the natural evolution of the global marketplace. So I will say two things about this. The first, the up-and-coming generation, when you talked about millennials, for example, are starting to take up a bigger piece of the global commerce pie. So where you and I might have been more prone to going to shopping malls, going to tailors to buy our products, our clothes, there's a whole new generation out there of younger people that are more prone to buying online, where really the decisions that they make come from the celebrities and influencers that they follow on TikTok and Instagram. And that really, I think, is the second part of the puzzle, where you see that the younger generation is going more on social marketplaces, web shops, which in turn has its effect on the global economic model and, of course, the volume of parcels that are shipped around the globe.
Okay, thank you. So we're also dealing with lack of warehouse space, shortages of labor, and higher energy costs. So, Sean, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I think the points that Nathan's made are very valid. I think from the position that we are in sort of with nShift is that we also we have the pleasure or the joy of looking at these challenges from the consumer end as well. So, I mean, we talk about those increasing rising of energy prices. It's, that impacts not just the retailers, it impacts the consumers as well. So they have a much smaller wallet. And so the retailers are really having to start to think about how they hold on to those customers. So the retailers kind of get it from all angles. They get these they get the higher sort of cost of running their businesses. They've got much smaller revenues coming in because consumers are having to try and tighten their belts a lot. And then you get it from the angle where the carriers are actually having to try and try and restrain that growth a little bit, because as you pointed out, Rick, there are considerable labour shortages across most of Europe at the moment. But at the same time, they've still got this increasing parcel volume. So it's a real challenge to get that balance just right.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about the impact on shippers and these global pressures. So Nathaniel, taking the global pressures into account, what are the trends you're seeing when it comes to where the parcel supply chains are headed, and more specifically, when it comes to technology?
Well, Rick, we have a saying in Dutch that goes, meten is weten. And for all of you that aren't fluent in Dutch, essentially what it comes down to is you don't know unless you measure. So it all starts with understanding the factors that are influencing your supply chain, having the data available and being able to correctly interpret that data. But just having the data is not enough. You have to be able to turn that data into actionable intelligence And we'll go into some examples further down the line, but essentially it means if you flick a switch on the left side, you have to understand what happens on the right side in order to create that actionable intelligence within your supply chain. But even if you have that action-grade intelligence, that only gets you so far, because you also need to have that data available to you at the right place, at the right time, which means you have to eliminate data silos. And specifically when we talk about a D365 user, when you have a supply chain solution, a parcel management solution set up in the back end, you want to make sure that your ERP and your back-end solution work in tandem. That data flows back and forth in a logical way and in real time, so you're able to take corrective action when you need to. So really eliminating data silos is on the top of everyone's list today.
Okay, thanks. And if anything, in recent events have shown that the world is an unpredictable place. Sean, can you please tell us how companies can build more resilience into their supply chain?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most common approach that retailers that we're seeing are taking is that they're trying to basically sort of sell their way through the troubles. As in, and when I say sell their way through these troubles, is to basically acquire those customers, keep up with those customers. So a lot of the customers we're talking to are talking about keeping that relationship really close to them, whereas traditionally they've been able to sort of let go of it a little bit and pass it out to the carriers. The holding onto the relationship, building that customer loyalty, maximizing, sort of the alignment that the brands have to their customers, so that they feel pretty close to that brand. And then that helps them ride out some of those challenges that they've seen through the supply chain. And again, sort of talking to what Nathan was talking about, taking your data out of those silos and start looking at the entire journey as a full journey, not individual pieces of a journey and just focusing on tiny little bits in isolation. I think it's key for retailers to really think about sort of very holistically about the journey and how they use the data to build those relationships.
Okay, thanks. Nathaniel, would you like to add anything?
I think one of the other major trends that we're seeing is that there's a huge shift to service-based applications. So rather than having one technology stack that is, for example, best of suite but not best of breed, you see that companies are more looking to scale their business models by implementing purpose-built applications, right? And that means that you want to work with an open architecture in your application to be able to connect to suppliers, vendors, and customers down the line. I think one of the great examples that we've seen from Microsoft is the Supply Chain Center, where Microsoft really is starting to understand that companies are taking an omni-channel approach. They want to integrate customers, vendors, suppliers into their supply chain models. And in order to do that, you have to connect with more than just Microsoft applications. You want to be able to connect to different warehouse management systems, transportation management systems, ERPs, third-party applications, and so on and so forth. So that's really another trend that we're seeing in today's market.
Okay, great. So in this slide, we kind of lead off with 86% of shoppers are willing to pay more for a great customer experience. So Sean, it's clear that retailers and manufacturers are facing increased challenges on a number of fronts, and it comes to fulfilling orders. With these added pressures, what is the key area that nShift is seeing its customers focusing on to keep their heads above water?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we touched on already, and I think this slide speaks quite nicely to it. If customers are willing to pay 86% of those customers are willing to pay more for a good customer experience, behind that number, there's actually a story that retailers are starting to listen to, and we're seeing that now when we go out and we talk to the retailers. They talk about joining their supply chain together. They talk about a lot of the operational pieces they're focused on, but we're also seeing more of an emergence now of retailers actually starting to realize that it's not just about operational efficiency. They can actually use customer experience, customer loyalty to start using that as a revenue generation strategy as well. So it's not just about extending the customer lifetime value. It's about accelerating time to next purchase. It's about how can you upsell, how can you cross-sell a customer when they're most engaged in your brand. And that's generally when they've actually made that first initial purchase. They're kind of dipping their toe into the water, testing you as a brand, And if they have a really good experience, they start to become advocates towards your brand, which, that opens up a whole load of opportunities for them. You have word of mouth, you've got upsell and cross sell when they're in the final mile journey as well, because that opens up like new marketing channels. So it's definitely a trend, or it's a solution that's been around for a few years now. But I think these added pressures are really starting to focus the minds of retailers as to how they can really optimize the journey, optimize the data they've got to basically wring every penny out of the customers that they can get.
Okay, Sean, so we're looking at the final mile experience, or we should call it final couple kilometers experience. So what are you seeing in trends with customers in that area?
But the main trend we're seeing is, I suppose you could call it, taking back control. So traditionally, you see retailers spending a lot of money on their front end, as in their website. They take great pride and really push the boat out when it comes to trying to acquire those customers, and then they try to optimize that journey internally within their control. But we're now starting to understand, or the retailers are starting to understand, that taking back control of that final mile journey and not just handing it over to a carrier along with a parcel at the DC door has now become probably one of the most important things that they can actually do to improve their success rates. So we're seeing them using fully branded tracking solutions. So instead of being one of those carrier sort of co-branded or fully carrier branded tracking status updates, you're now seeing retailers implementing solutions where the customer gets updates directly from the retailer, and it's very richly, very immersively branded as that retailer. And they're also utilizing that opportunity to basically market to the customer as well. So they're very carefully putting recommendations into that communication, and they're churning what is traditionally what you could probably class as a logistics type solution, as in just sending out, your parcel's on its way, it's out for delivery. And they're now using that as one of their main channels for being able to upsell to the customer and actually keeping them immersed in that branded journey.
Okay, thank you. Nathaniel, would you like to add anything?
I think Sean is making really valid points, and I think one of the key things that's really in today's market is you have to be able to offer a certain degree of choice to your customers, right? And it's not just enough anymore to offer express and standard. These days, customers also want to have green choices. They want to be able to ship to a pickup point. And that's one of the reasons why we chose to work with nShift for our carrier library in Europe, because we also understand from our perspective, from the D365 perspective, how complicated and tedious it is to build those carrier connections and to build those services. And keep in mind, it's not a one-time effort. Carriers will change their data formats. Carriers will change their labels, their documentation. And if we continue down the road of the customer perspective here, it's research has shown that 30% of all baskets are abandoned at checkout for the lack of the right shipping option. So our customers also are looking, for solutions where the amount of options that you can deliver to your customers are no longer a bottleneck. And when we integrate nShift into our solution, we have made 1,000 carriers available out of the box for D365 users.
Okay, thank you. So Sean, once you've given the customer this kind of choice and convenience, it stands to reason to continue to enhance this experience.
I mean, I think Nathan's touched on quite a valid point around what he's saying about checkout as well. So that's really where you start to build that foundation as the customer comes into what you could call the true post-purchase journey. So offering that choice, offering that convenience is one of the key elements to improving the conversion. But as I touched on earlier on, the whole point of continuing that journey, and once you step out of that highly branded retail environment pre-purchase, going into that post-purchase journey, actually feeling like you're in I suppose you're creating almost like a trust element. So it's not just about completely whitewashing the journey with here's the retailer brand, it's all about us. You have to also consider that the carriers that are a partner with you as a retailer And you can actually use things like the carrier's logo in the checkout, in the tracking experience, and it acts fairly much like a payment gateway. It acts almost like a trust, like a trust mark or a trust brand. If you know you're using something like FedEx, UPS, DHL, that gives the consumer a sense of security that it's not being just delivered by a local taxi like that. So it's really useful to use that journey to, one, build the trust, but then also open it up as a communication channel as well. So we mentioned the marketing earlier on, but also think about the feedback that can be caught in that journey as well. So the feedback in that journey or in that instance is a little bit different to what you'd probably get with companies like Trustpilot and some of the other companies out there like LipSync. So you're actually collecting the feedback in the moment. Now, that's a very powerful place to capture that feedback, because it's giving you direct line of sight into what's happening to a particular consumer in a particular order journey. And if they're suddenly getting into a horrible place or going down the unhappy path, giving them the ability to provide that feedback and receive the feedback, action the feedback, gives you, the retailer, the chance to actually bring that customer back onto that happy path, because you're actioning it right there and right then. You're not like the other sort of feedback solutions that are out there, waiting 2 days, 2 hours, 2 weeks once the actual journey's finished before you're collecting the data. So plugging that information into your customer service solution, into your workflows, is really, really powerful.
Nathaniel, would you like to add anything about the enhanced experience?
I think, as we alluded to before, we want to make sure that that data is not just available in your carrier solution or in your logistics department. You want to make sure that it's available throughout your entire ERP, so that you get that actionable intelligence. And from a shipping perspective, of course, you want to have proactive information on statuses, so you can inform your customers when your shipment is going to arrive in whatever way, shape, or form. What we do, for example, is we integrate tracking data into the sales orders from D365, so that when you have a customer service agent and they are checking an order, they can actually proactively receive information to inform the customers as well. But there's other data as well, right? If you see that from a delivery perspective, an end customer is repeatedly not home when you expect to deliver your parcel, you can prioritize different options at checkout, and, for example, offer a ship to a pickup point as the first option rather than ship to home. And as we alluded to before, I think end customers, consumers these days are realizing that parcel shipping and ordering things online, it does have its impact on the environment. So usually they will be prone to sort of shift that around and make sure that they pick the right options in order to build on a sustainable, more sustainable shipping model as well.
Okay, great. So Sean, you were talking earlier about the customer experience within the final mile. Let's talk about that customer experience and the total order lifecycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I suppose to pick up on what Nathan was just about to talk about there about the sustainability. So the final mile isn't really the end of the journey. The final mile is just partial way through sort of the whole order life cycle. So if a customer receives those goods and they actually don't like the goods, or they don't fit, or it's the wrong color, they want a frictionless experience to be able to send those goods back. Now, Nathan mentioned the magic word sustainability. So there's a big trend at the moment that's growing amongst retailers around whether they should actually stop giving free returns and start charging for those returns. And that it's creating a little bit of it's a hard to swallow moment for the consumer. They want to be sustainable, but they don't want to pay for it. So there's different techniques about how you can leverage those sustainable delivery solutions actually in the returns process as well. So giving them the option to have a sustainable delivery option, and then getting them to actually contribute to that is one way of, I suppose, manipulating the consumer's mind into actually thinking they're doing something good, and okay, I'll pay for it because it's helping save the planet. One of the solutions we've implemented at nShift is something called micro impacts. So what that actually does is the customer does actually pay for it. It could be the outbound or the return shipment. But then what you actually get is a little bit of a reward. You actually get to choose one of 3 sort of charitable good deeds, I think is the best way to describe it. So it could be taking 100 grams of plastic out of the ocean. It could be planting a tree in Madagascar. But you get to click on it and you get to choose what good deed you're going to do to help save the planet. So you're removing that whole, I've had to pay for my return, or I've had to pay for my outbound shipping. And you're now thinking, oh, actually, I've just paid a little bit to help save the planet. And if you click on that, and this is the really clever piece around the solution, if you click on it again, it takes you to a branded summary page, and you can actually see what all of the retailers' customers have contributed and what they've done. And very subtly, what that does in the consumer's mind is you now feel part of a bigger community of doing something really good and something really powerful to save the planet. So it's like I say, it's not something we've built, it's something we've done with a partner, but it's had such a good amount of feedback from the retailers about, because it's just a very subtle way of helping customers cross that line when they get to that returns piece. And then you start thinking about, then if you can do returns, you could do recycling, you can do refurbishing, you can do repairs. And I think everything about return now in the mind of the retailer is around making things more sustainable. And I suppose it kind of harks back to what we said earlier on about customers have less money to spend, so you've really got to win their hearts and minds.
Okay, thanks. Nathaniel, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, as long as we're talking about that data element of that shipping solution. So another thing that really helps you to do is identify if you have any toxic products in your warehouse, in your ERP setup. So for example, if you evaluate the returns that come back and you see that a certain blue sweater has come back 100% of the time, but it's actually listed as a red sweater, and that's very useful for you to know, and that's also data that you can get from that logistics element of the pie, obviously. And then again, you also want to be able to identify, just grabbing back on what I said earlier about the influencers and social media channels. There's a vast number of customers, consumers out there that might order massive quantities of product online. You have 20 products that you order online and you're going to send back 19 out of them, for example, that are sort of abusing or misusing the system, however you want to call it. So as a retailer, you also want to have visibility when that's happening. So first of all, and you understand what's happening, you understand where it's happening, and you can take corrective action if you so deem to.
Okay, thanks. So we're going to go to this slide and talk a little bit about options for D365 finance and supply chain customers. So Nathan, from your perspective, what options are out there for these customers when they're looking to enhance their parcel shipping and supply chain?
Well, to take it back a second, as everyone will know, the standard parcel functionality in D365 is fairly limited. Each carrier connection has to be built and maintained individually, which is tedious and unscalable, as we've talked about before. The pick and pack options are limited. And to top it off, there's no embedded track and trace functionality, which will very likely lead to poor visibility and an extension of that, probably angry pitchfork customers. So there are essentially three models that we see in today's market or that we come across frequently. So option number one, you can build a bespoke solution. So you can go down the road of sitting down with your Microsoft partner, identifying your supply chain workflows, and start to build that from the ground up. Now, to be fair, the advantage is, of course, it's a tailor-made solution for your business. You can identify it exactly as you want to set it up. But obviously, it's a long and tedious process. You need to have supply chain expertise. You need to have Microsoft expertise in-house. And usually it's a long, complicated process that's difficult to scale, right? And as we alluded to before, you want your technology stack to be nimble, and this is pretty much creating the opposite. The second option, you can integrate multi-carrier parcel software in the back end, which by itself is not a bad idea, but it does require you to have extensive knowledge of both Microsoft D365 as well as the back-end supply chain software in order to perform that integration in the right way. And we've all been a part of integration projects. you line them out. They never really go as you plan them to. They take longer. They're more costly than you set them out to be. And you still have to maintain that solution that you've built. You have to have an internal support desk for it. When you upgrade it from the D365 perspective or from the supply chain perspective, you have to test it extensively and take corrective action if you need to within that integration piece. So, and of course, you have the risk of data silos, what we talked about before. Our recommendation is really to go with a purpose-built ISV solution. And in the case of NMB, we've designed a parcel management solution that is fully operable from within the D365 screens, meaning that you don't ever have to leave D365 in order to make use of any of the functionality when it comes to parcel shipping, rating, creating the labels, and truly create that integrated workflow rather than having siloed data. Furthermore, the model that we choose is it's a modular deployment, which means we get you up and running quickly and effectively, and we take full responsibility of the integration throughout the subscription lifecycle, which means that if anything ever happens, you call us and we have a support desk that can help you out quickly and effectively. And last but not least, it just going back to option 2, if you've done that integration with the backend parcel solution, and you've done that tedious process where you finally have it up and running, you probably never want to touch the solution again unless you really have to. Conversely, parcel management is a core of what we do. So we keep track of all the market trends, we understand the developments out there, and we will keep updating the system. We will bring new functionality to it. We have a roadmap. So in that sense, it's perhaps better off to go for a purpose-built ISV solution than any of the other options out there.
Okay, thank you. Sean, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think just from a sort of commercial perspective, I think the sort of the message that we're hearing from clients is quite clear, and it's coming through loud and clear. It's they're starting to realise that they've got to have that joined up data journey to keep customers engaged. But really, they're starting to realise now that they've got to start taking control of that relationship, use the data as much as possible to keep the customer engaged, and then look at every opportunity to start building that lifetime value, building the opportunity to increase revenue and increase their margins as well. So yeah, I think that's it. I think there's a big opportunity out there for retailers to be able to make the most of the challenges they're facing at the moment. And I think that the retailers that don't engage in this sort of activity are going to be the ones that see fall into the wayside.
Okay, thank you. So I want to thank both panelists for joining us today. And you can reach NMB Solutions at these numbers and URLs and QR codes. So if you're in a situation where you want to upgrade your supply chain technology, by all means, please contact NMB Solutions. I'm sure they can help you out. Nathaniel, anything you'd like to close with?
No, I mean, it's great for being on the panel. Thanks so much for having us, Rick. And obviously, if there's anything we can do to help companies in the market out there, feel free to reach out.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Bye for now.
Thanks very much.
Bye.